All right. Okay. So first off, actually, something not related. Where did you get the interesting name Dolphin? I'm sure that you get that often because it's not a very common name.
No, no, it's very uncommon. The short story is that my mom was struggling to come up with a name for me. And I actually was born, and she was trying to spend time with me to get a sense of who I was and thought that would help. But I was almost a month old and I had no name, and the government was kind of nudging and nagging at her to figure it out for a birth certificate and citizenship and all that stuff. And a friend of hers, because she was really sort of at a loss, a friend of hers said, "Why don't you ask for his name in a dream?" And
Hmm.
without better ideas at the time, she said, "Okay." So she went to go to bed that night and said to herself, or said to the universe, "I need a name for my son." And so that night she had a dream that she was sitting at a table. A man that she didn't know came, sat down next to her. He looked at her and he said, "Why don't you name him Dolphin?" And then she woke up.
Wow. That's cool. I like that. That's a very unique and fascinating story. I don't hear that kind of stuff every day. That's for sure.
Yeah, it's a unique
Okay.
one.
Nice. Okay. Well, now let's get back to the topic. Okay.
Sure.
So, as I'm sure you've seen, and this kind of came to me about a week ago because I was trying to come up with a real good first episode topic, like a real catchy one, and I kept I started taking transit since I moved because I live close to where I work and then just happened to use the transit. And so I see a lot of people every day back and forth on the train and going up to the, entering into the station and leaving it. And I see, hundreds and hundreds of people. And I notice their facial expressions and their behavior and their, the way that they're presenting themselves and when they're sitting in their in the chair or how they talk to each other. And I notice a lot of people, they seem to have like it's like a natural or just a like their default is like angry or like an antisocial feel to it. And I I remember when I was younger, I would my opinion and thoughts on this was a lot different than today. And I used to really think that a lot of people were just not very open-minded, or they were just really kind of closed to themselves, or just not, they don't want to interact with people. It was a negative thought, a negative feeling. And I was truly uneducated and didn't really understand why a lot of people, I'm not saying everybody is, but a lot of people have gone through some kind of trauma, whether it's a repetitive trauma through relationships, through growing up as a child, bullying in school. Like school is a real tough for most people. Expectations and getting along with individuals, and they're so it takes a toll on a lot of people, and we're so fragile, like mentally fragile, that things at a young age or even in an early adult age can really affect us, and it shapes the way we live real easily, especially if it's something very you know deceptive or significant, like being in an abusive relationship. And all you leave it, and the first thing you think of is, instead of going, okay, fresh start, the moment you try to look at, like, especially if it's been maybe a couple, your first thought isn't, this is going to be a great start. It's, I'm scared that I'm going to have this happen again. And so they're automatically feeling worried, and like there's a bit of paranoia and anxiety and stress about starting a new relationship, because their first thing is they're afraid of finding someone who's going to do the same thing over, like all over again. And so it keeps them from truly expressing themselves or being real and honest, because they're afraid that that next person's just going to be like their last partner, and they're just going to repeat the whole thing over. Or they've dealt with, they just haven't had a really good life due to multiple situations in their lives, that like maybe they were abused as a child, or their parents were so hard on them that they built this expectation that was unrealistic. So they work hard, but they don't know how to be a social person, because that's all they ever do is work, because they feel like if they work and work and work, that they'll please their parents, or they'll please whoever they're working for, and they'd spend no time living their life. And it's incredible, and at the same time sad, how people can be easily and quickly, like, it just sticks. And a lot of, I hate to say it, but it's like there's not a lot of people who are very like strong mentally in certain areas, and it affects them, and people see it. That's not everybody's looking for it.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot in what you said there. And, for those people that might be listening and are carrying some challenging pieces from their past, I think what I want to start with is just a reflection that, in my over 20 years of working with people, and in many ways, some of the most traumatized people, some of the people who grew up with the most challenging environments, everyone wants the same thing. On a deep level, we want to feel connected, first to ourselves and our own sense of existence, and then through that to others. And of course, we want safety, but I would actually argue that safety is not a primary need. It is important in all of the ways that it's important, but living a life where every moment is safe actually isn't much of a life. So another thing that I like to invite people that are working with their own traumatized pieces to remember is life is not supposed to be free of trauma. Life is not supposed to be free of difficulty. We're not supposed to have it easy and safe all the time.
Yeah.
The real key is to be connected to something that makes it worth showing up for the things that are painful and difficult. And I think that's the real epidemic right now around mental health and around trauma, is not so much that there's too much trauma in the world. And I'm not trying to minimize trauma in any way, but it's my contention that what we're really struggling with in modern times is a relationship with a meaning that is deep enough to help us make sense of the trauma and pain of life. And when we have that, all of a sudden we find ourselves leaning in, opening, becoming more curious, becoming more courageous, reaching out and connecting with people that can really support us. So that to me is absolutely primary. The first goal should not be that we run out and try to make everyone feel warm and fuzzy and safe, although there's a place for that. Our real first step is to first reconnect with our own reason for being, our own existential why, and to bring that into any of the interactions or work we do with other people, especially if someone's a coach or a therapist or a social service worker. If we're not connected to our joy of being, our own existential why, how can we reflect it to someone that's struggling with that more than anything else, even more than the pain from their trauma? They're struggling with a sense that they're not connected to a reason for being that makes sense to them. So yeah, that's a place we can start, and then wherever you want to go, I'm happy to walk along.
Absolutely. That it's amazing, because you mentioned that about the connection, and it is a lot what we strive for connection, because I don't think anybody, when they choose, and they branch out into the world, I don't think anybody purposefully chooses to be alone. Like, that's not their ultimate goal. I know that there are some people who enjoy having alone time, and they are the opposite of I can't think of the word at the moment. Sorry. Introverted.
Extroverted.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah. There are introverted people. It's just that they have a good sense of balance in their life. They like to have the good times and have fun with their friends, or have a relationship, or just, have fun, but they also crave that time to themselves, because they like to reflect, they like to spend time with self-improvement, or just enjoying whatever they do, and not having to worry about what other people think or say. And it's interesting, the whole connection thing. Like, I was just recently out of a relationship that was not at first, but eventually became an emotionally abusive relationship. And there was so much negativity and so much criticism and harshness that when I started, and this is what really started to broaden my understanding of the need of that connection and emotional maturity and stuff, is the moment I was starting to hang out and interact with a friend of mine who were really close, but it was a lot of positive interaction and a lot of like back and forth, talking about each other's like personal issues and situations, and having good connection and really enjoying conversations, and leaving the for the rest of the day feeling nice and good, and and just having that like feeling like this was awesome, I want more. And it had been such a long time since I had felt that, and it was so extreme that my system, I didn't know what to do with it. It was like something foreign had come into my life, and it was so good that I didn't know how to handle it, how to break it down, how to manage it properly, so that I could enjoy it but not get overwhelmed by it. And eventually, like, I had help from people who were, showing me other angles that I didn't, I wasn't able to see, because I was too focused on one area. And after their assistance, it just dawned on me. Like, it was like, I'm now, and it was very ironic, I'm now becoming more emotionally mature than I was than being in this relationship, because I'm starting to see the benefits of all this positive energy and this connection, but I'm also able to step back and compare it to the other half, which was mostly negative. And it really broadened my perspective on life and on connection, and my level of understanding on how this works. Because, and I'm not ashamed to say this, I was at a point where I honestly believed that love was either intimate or you don't have it. It's one or the other. There isn't a middle or in between or multiple positions in the middle. I thought it was just all or nothing. Mm-hmm. And learning that, yes, you can love people, and it's in a friendship way, or in a child way. Like, there's all different angles, and that exposure to it really opened my eyes, and I've learned so much just in that time frame about it. It's amazing, and it's so amazing when you feel that.
Yeah, and love would be one of those things that trauma seems to cut us off from.
Yeah.
The traumatic experience creates changes in us. There are responses and adaptations to trauma that are highly adaptive and functional to what the initial threat or damage was. But the trauma is meant to be addressed and cared for and integrated in the context of a healthy family and community. Yeah. And we live in a modern age where that's rarely available to people.
Absolutely.
And so then we see what we see. We see people who struggle to feel connected to their own sense of love, their own ability to love themselves, their own ability to discern what love is and what it's not. Hence all of the toxic and dysfunctional relationships that tend to sprout from a traumatized history. And the beautiful thing is, like, love doesn't care. Love wants to flow. And so the moment we make room for it, it starts to move again. And
Yeah.
the challenge for those of us with really painful pasts is that as we open to love, we also open to pain. And so there's just no way, to me, the flow of life is like a river, and it's full of experiences, some of them exquisite, some of them terrible. But the more we try to block off or hold or control the flow of life, the flow of experience, the more it just does what rivers do when you do that, which is they become a reservoir. And
Yeah.
most of humanity is walking around with a big reservoir of unprocessed emotion, and in all of that, unexpressed love.
Absolutely. Yeah, we learn our habits, like when, in any aspect of caring and expressing our emotions, we learn our habits so quickly and so early in life, that when we're exposed to a new, something brand new that you've never known before, you've never experienced, it it can definitely be very scary. And our first reaction is usually going to be to to kind of back off and evaluate and wonder if this is the right thing to do. And if we've had a lot of negative experiences and a lot of trauma in from whatever aspect, whether it's from our parents or from schoolmates or past relationships, it really hampers our ability to have an open mind and a fair, you know, aspect of what we're going to deal with or what we could be dealing with. And most people, their first reaction is to back away and say no, because their fear from their past is taking over, and they're not. I don't think that they're in that situation. They're not healed yet. They're not whole enough to really to appreciate from both sides. Like it's good to have it on both. Like you don't want to be jumping in without that kind of wondering and seeing it from a non-biased point of view. But you have to be capable of seeing the benefits and the repercussions on both sides. And a lot of people just aren't really ready for it due to their trauma.
Yeah, I'm curious for you, bringing obviously a lot of your personal sentiments and your personal experiences to the table for the podcast, and also wanting to have conversations and interview people. Are there any areas that we want to focus on, or are there any dots that if connected would really support you in the podcast or in your life, or for the audience that's coming to the table to listen? I'd love to just get into some pieces that feel sort of tangible and practical for people, whatever that might
Absolutely.
be.
Absolutely. I I haven't had a ton of relationships. I've been in 3 serious ones that span probably over 10 or so years. And the one thing that always happened is I was I was not capable of really standing up for my own boundaries, like setting a boundary and staying with it. I would often give in, or like instead of saying no, I don't really want to do this, I would rather sit home and relax, or no, this isn't right for me. I often would just let it go and do what they wanted. Or I was incapable of seeing the signs that this was just not right. This wasn't good. And my immediate the opposite would happen. It would be where I feel like this is as good as it's going to get. And if I leave, I'm not going to find someone who's going to be better. So I might as well just stick around and deal with it. Maybe it'll change. That was a consistent in all the relationships. And each time before I would get into the next one, I always would say, I'm going to be different. I'm going to make sure that I do what's right for me, that I'm not going to be a pushover. And yet it never happened. It was always the same. Like I couldn't fight it.
Yeah.
And because the urge to give in and make someone happy, like I'm a fawn when it comes to the 4Fs.
Mm-hmm.
And it felt more important to make them happy than to worry about my own happiness. Yeah. And ultimately, it ended up just either delaying the ultimate ending, or making things worse.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I'm curious if we want to kind of use that. I'm sure a lot of people can relate that the fawn
Absolutely.
response to tension or conflict, or even just competing needs on both sides of a relationship, is familiar to a lot of people. So, I don't mind kind of digging in, like, why do we do that? I think there's two primary reasons, and often they come as a package for people in terms of why they fawn as a response to tension and conflict. So yeah, let me just get into the two primary ones that I notice very frequently. They're not the whole story, but they tend to be a consistent genesis for people.
Right. Yeah.
So
no problem. Absolutely.
What I notice it's very much the people pleasing dynamic, just looking to try to just cover everything with a nice warm fuzzy blanket and everything's okay. And often we deny or disregard our own needs in our effort to try to make it all okay for everyone. And so, oftentimes that develops in an environment where there's volatility, and we at a very young age take on the responsibility of trying to keep the peace. Like, it's not safe. And for us to feel like we have any sense of connection and stability, we feel like it's all on us to do it. And that when we don't do it, or we don't do it well, things go badly. And so that shines a little bit of light on why we might do something like find ourselves playing out this fawn and people pleasing dynamic, and then after the relationship reflect and go, okay, I'm not going to do that again. Like, I'm done with that. I'm better than that. I'm worth more, whatever we say to ourselves. And then we get into another relationship, and in spite of the intellectual understanding, on a deeper level within our biology, within our kind of nervous system, the same danger feels like it's looming. So even though the intellectual understanding is there in our system, it's like, if I don't do this, it's big trouble. That's what it feels like. And so then we're facing the same precipice, the same, like, oh, I got to jump off this cliff to do this thing that feels like I'm going to die if I do it. Or I can go back to this kind of warm, fuzzy blanket that I can go to, and I know it's not good, but it feels safe. So, like, that's one where it was dangerous, and we had to come in and kind of save the day, or at least that was the story we told. And that one kind of includes these two pieces, which is either we had something or someone in our life that was the tyrant, and we identified that as wrong and bad.
Mm-hmm.
Assertive feels like that's the road we're going down. And if we vilified it or them, and we made it wrong and bad to be aggressive or controlling or whatever that is, then we won't even tread close to it. And unfortunately, assertiveness and standing up for ourselves looks and feels, from the outside looking in, a lot like aggressiveness and control. And so then we skirt it. We just stay away from it entirely. And so that's one.
Right.
And then the other one, again, is just if we identified with someone else that was in the space that was the receiver or the victim of that aggression, then our desire to try to help or hold or protect them kind of takes over. And then that can include us, but oftentimes it's mom or it's a sibling. And so then we're stuck in this place where we've vilified anything that looks strong or aggressive or controlling. And that makes it really hard to set boundaries in a relationship, because that's what it looks and feels like to us. Or we get really locked in this protector, peacekeeper sort of personality. And again, not doing it feels like we're putting ourselves, and even like irrationally, we're just putting life at risk.
Yeah.
By not doing this thing that we've done throughout our lives. And so, one thing we can do is just have just tons of compassion for the fact that that's what I learned to do when I was little, and it really worked initially, and in a way it continues to work. But it's just really good to know that the road to integrating that pattern is going to involve facing and feeling all of the ways in which that coping strategy helped you not face and feel. So and the real challenge, or one of the big challenges, is that there are still people that are bad actors. There are still people that are abusive and dangerous.
Yeah.
So it's not to fully turn that whole system off. It's just to know where we sit on the spectrum. Like, this is one thing I learned this working with athletes. So you can break most things down along some kind of spectrum. Like, this is an extreme on that side and this is another extreme on this side. And if you identify that you are way on one end of the extreme spectrum, then spending time just exploring and playing on the other side is going to be extremely rich with learning for you. So again, if you are a people pleaser and you always do what other people want and you're always putting yourself second, even if it's not always the right thing to do, just playing on the side of putting yourself first, playing on the side of just saying what you want and need, even if you're not sure that it's the right thing to do. Like, you have to give yourself permission to begin exploring the way you would have as a child if you had a safe environment. That's how we learn to be socially apt, right? Like, we play and we make mistakes, but we're playing on all the different parts of the spectrum and seeing the results of that play. And then again, if we're present and we have other people modeling, over time we just learn how to play well. And people who are carrying unresolved trauma, not really to any fault of their own, just didn't learn how to play well in relationship. And
Yeah,
that's the road of healing trauma, is to learn how to play again.
absolutely. I think at the same time, a lot of people, if poor self-awareness is probably somewhat harmful too, because if they have no awareness that of their actions, like I'm not saying that it's their fault, of course, but I'm just saying that if they're just oblivious to anything that's going on with themselves or with the people around them, it is a lot harder for anybody to even start finding out and going down that path to towards healing or to discover, self-discovery. And that was for a lot of my life an issue, is just I wasn't self-aware of things. It felt like it was copacetic, like everything was fine. I grew up for such a long time in a certain way that it just felt normal. And like the way I behaved, the way I interacted with people, it just felt normal. I never thought after going, something's not right about that. Why am I having situations or interactions and responses from people that are unusual or closed off or negative, and other people are having, a good response or are having nice friendships and always getting together. None of that ever occurred. It was just like going day after day going, yeah, okay, did my thing. You don't think about it. And then suddenly you have somebody kind of open your eyes and you see this, like you finally see if you're the way you act or the way somebody else acts towards you, it's not as simple as just what you see. Like, what you see isn't always what you get. There is something else. Mm-hmm. There could just be, they could be having a bad day. They could have been, they could be in a relationship that's really rough and they don't know what to expect when they come home after each day of work, or maybe they're dealing with an illness or something that it's really making them struggle, and if they've got CPTSD already, it's making their lives even more complicated and harder to deal with. And many of us, including myself, never really looked at it from another angle or from an outside point of view. And ever since being shown that and my awareness, started to expand, not only did I see myself in a different way and started to understand everything so much better, it really started to show other, like, how other people, like, what they're hiding or what they're willing to show and talk about. And I kind of feel in a way privileged because I have my knowledge and my self-awareness on all this has allowed me to help other people directly, like literally just people are talking about their struggles, and I'm able to go, well, it sounds like you're dealing with, like, you got a mother who might have narcissistic tendencies, and you've dealt with that for most of your life, and now your instinct is to work so hard to please others that you don't take care of yourself, or you don't stand up for yourself, or you're just working to make others happy. And suddenly it was like the light bulb went off, and literally a week later I'm like, yeah, I've been thinking about it and researching and looking it up, and it makes sense, and I get it. And it's like they just helping, that knowledge and that understanding of it, and being able to help someone see things from a different point of view, just by that self is enough, right? Like, especially when it's a friend that you want to see them improve their life and learn how to deal with their own trauma, and start the healing process, and showing them the right way to go is quite something. And it's not enough people have that, right? There's very few out there that have any kind of guidance or any sort of like that light ahead of them saying, here, follow this. This is a good way to go.
Yeah, yeah. Sorry, someone just came to my door.
It's fine.
Yeah, it's interesting because the information can help a lot. Someone who's just really lost and out of touch with what's going on and why and what is there for me to do about it. People who are still locked in fairly strong trauma responses and trauma dynamics. In a certain way, they're in a bit of a cloud, like they can't see clearly and they can't feel clearly. And these are
Yeah.
the ways that we're meant to interpret and create solutions for the life that we're navigating. Um, and to me, the information is just part of the story, because I think to myself of someone who has lots of letters next to their name, and they've written books, and they know the answers in the back of the textbook, but that on its own isn't really going to help, because and you see this in one of the primary concepts in therapy, like, and I'm sure you've heard of it, but
Mm-hmm.
the primary indicator as to whether a therapeutic approach or intervention is going to be effective is not the experience of the therapist, it's not
Right.
the skill of the therapist, it's not the modality, it's how safe and connected the patient or person getting support feels towards the therapist. It's called the
Yeah.
therapeutic alliance. So there's something about us feeling connected and safe with another human being and feeling care and love coming from them that is transformative to what is trauma. And to me, it's like, of course, because that's what a loving parent would do. And
Yeah.
in the context of a connected, supportive community, that's what community is meant to do. It's meant to play the role of the loving parent for the members of the community. And again, in modern time, how many of us have that? How many of us can at any moment pick up the phone and reach out to someone, or get online and reach out to someone and have a face-to-face with them, and they're going to be available, and they're going to be responsive and loving and caring, and they're going to know how to be with us in a way that really helps us. Some people have it,
Yeah. Yeah.
most don't, and it's a huge
No.
challenge that we face. Like, you spoke just before we got on the call about um, you know like, we have a big challenge coming, like whatever's going on currently with mental illness and mental well-being. Things are going to be much worse before they get better, and we're not
Yes.
ready. And so, I think this conversation and more like it are important, not just to shine light on what's going on, but to have a relevant conversation around, well, what do we do? What is the most meaningful way that we can start to ready ourselves as individuals, as families, as communities, and as societies for the needs that are at play and that will continue to grow around mental well-being.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. I think some of the first things that does need to change, and it's going to take maybe a generation or two, is it's the outsider's point of view and opinion on mental health and on people that, while we all see it every day, we a lot of us are sits, a downtown of a city or in a poorer neighborhood, and we see a lot of people who are struggling, and there's a lot of people out there whose their first thought is, these people, they should just go get a job, or why are they, like, they don't really understand what these people may have gone through. They may have a mental illness. Maybe they went through severe trauma and they didn't know how to handle it, and they got into addiction, and unfortunately it's caused them to not be able to keep a job, or they're not able to function because it's so overwhelming that this is the only thing they know that's safe or that works for them. And people, every day people are always, their first thought is a negative thought. They don't go, if these people need help, if there were just more people out there that could give them the help that they need, if the government was a little more open-minded to what can we do instead of how do we eliminate it, it might change. It's going to take a while, but it might just, it may happen, because unfortunately a lot of people out there aren't getting the help that they desperately need, and it could be very beneficial for them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's not an easy equation to solve. It's not obvious what the right intervention is. It's not obvious what the right amount and kinds of resource that the issues are calling for. It's clear to me that healthy, honest, authentic, meaningful human relationship is a primary intervention. And that doesn't have to be trained. No one needs to have, a master's or a PhD or any particular training.
Right.
That training does help in certain ways, but the idea that someone needs to have that to be able to provide support and guidance to someone that's suffering from something like trauma is just a silly new modern concept. It's sort of the professionalization of care and expertise, which again, there's a place, there's a role, but the idea that some institutionalized authority and certification is the only way to know whether someone can bring real care and sort of respite for people that are suffering is, again, to me, it's just upside down and inside out.
Yeah, that's true. There's not a lot of open minds right now to new thoughts and new thinking and possibilities out there. It's obviously improved. Like, we're not sending all these people to institutions and locking them up for the rest of their lives and thinking they're just crazy. I know that a long time ago that was what they always did with people who were dealing with mental illness and trauma, that they didn't know what to do. And yet I guess the best example I can think of is governments. All they want to do is look at giving money to things like military or to healthcare, but I never hear anything about mental health. Like, there was up here, it's like, there was, in about a year or so ago, there was this big news about the federal government giving families that don't have private health care or health coverage, free dental care, and like daycare, and yet there wasn't a single word or even a breath about mental health. There was nothing to do with mental health.
Mhm.
And we have like literally one day a year where there's a big deal about tweeting out mental health and talking about it, but it just feels like there's so far to go to really think and do something about it, and no one seems to really want to step up and even start it.
Mhm.
There's priorities that are way more important to them, and yet this the thing that I don't think they realize is it's really going to catch up, because if we have another, in 5 years we have another pandemic, or or something really seriously like severe happens in the world or even in a country, there's going to be a lot of people who are going to be affected, and they're just not going to know what to do. Like, it's going to be one of those, it'll be like trying to figure out how to make a vaccine for COVID. It'll be like, how do we deal with this? We're so far behind.
Mhm.
There are millions of people who are dealing with mental illness and trauma and whatever else, and we don't know what to do. Like, we got to be at a point where that's never going to be the case. We're so far back that it feels like it's too hard, too much of a climb.
Yeah, yeah, and there's a challenge there. Like, if we think about kind of governance and political will, the more complex a challenge is, and the longer the timeline between when implement something and when you see positive result from that implementation,
Yeah,
uh, the bigger and longer that is, the less politically easy it is to create programs, to implement something, to how do you get your constituency to re-elect you when your plan to solve the problems is a 20-year plan or a 30-year plan, which is what many of these issues would actually require, right? So, like, we have a
yeah,
political system that's not built to really address genuine big picture long-term issues. So that, just from a bigger picture solution perspective, like, our societies are not currently built
correct.
to take care of, to address, to navigate big issues.
Absolutely.
And so that's one. To me, if I was in charge, and this is like a modern human paradigm challenge or issue, which is we tend to focus on the problem, which really is the symptom, and then we busy ourselves trying to fix or cover or band-aid the symptom without coming with real curiosity and real intelligence and real problem solving around, like, what is this symptom telling us about the well-being of the system, whether that's an
Mm-hmm.
individual human being, a family, a community, or a society. Like, the principles are there. We actually have understanding of the principles that allow a human culture to thrive. And if we took our attention away from the symptoms and went, what does a human culture need to really feel connected to meaning and connected to purpose, connected to a reason for being, a reason to be connected, a reason to be together, a reason to collaborate? And then how do we begin making adjustments to our society to more reflect those principles? Again, that's like a 50 or 100, like you said, 2 generations. I think maybe a bit generous, but if
Yeah.
if we took 50 or 100 years to just make slow, consistent, meaningful adjustments to how we do business as society that are aligned with what we already know as first principles or core principles around what allows human culture to thrive, eventually we would see the results. But people don't trust that, or they have
No.
interests that pull them away from staying honest to an endeavor like that. And then, we'll see. It's not clear to me that we're going to do well over the next 50 or 100 years, but the time will pass, and so we'll have to wait and see what happens.
Yeah, exactly. I know. I think right now we haven't even reached the starting line, I guess you could say, if you want to look at it as in a race. they're arguing about who's going to get the first lane at this point. Um, it's pretty. I guess I just, you see everything going on today, like, especially right now, and it just feels like the last thing anybody's thinking about is the well-being of people. It's like individual goals that these people have, or they want to do things just in spite of other groups, because it's more important than working together to get to finish something or to make it better. They rather fight and argue for the sake of being on the opposite side. Like, no one seems to have any ideas beyond just, well, what can we do to delay or to cause problems, or how can we get elected? So what can we, how do we make the other person look bad rather than how do I make myself look good?
Yeah. Do you mind? I want to say something about
Sure.
that, what you just shared. It's and it's actually really common, and I wouldn't say just with people who have experienced trauma, but it's a tendency, and probably more and more as time has gone in this modern culture, but our desire to paint extremely broad strokes and use universals or yeah, ultimate statements like always, ever, no one, never. Just in how you shared, it's like, it seems like no one. And I'll just push back a little bit. Like, I think if we're in the media, if we're looking
Yeah.
at social media or even sort of mass media, news outlets and that kind of stuff, it's easy to get depressed pretty quick.
Yeah.
What I've been finding, like, I've been on the road for 6 months and I've just been in and out of communities all over North America, and it's been really heartening how much love and generosity and presence and connection there is that I'm experiencing. Now, I know that's not the whole story. I'm not blind to or insensitive to how strange and upside down our world is right now. And for sure, when it comes to mental health and mental health service, I think we're missing the mark in some really significant ways. And I don't think it's helpful to tell ourselves the story that there's just nothing good happening and no one has a clue and no one's doing anything, because I think it's first, it's not true to what we would more deeply know about life and about people, but it
Yeah.
also locks us in a way of relating that will then bring into our day, and then we'll be less available than we could be, and we'll give less of an example of the kind of world we want to live in. So yeah, that going to extremes or going to kind of like black and white thinking, that's a very common result of trauma
Absolutely.
experiences. And yeah, so anyway, I just wanted to kind of shine a little
Yeah.
light there.
No, I think that is a very good point, and that is so accurate, because it's true. You see it all the time. It's people. It seems like there's very little room for self thought or like exploration. If someone hears something, they would rather, it's easier for them to jump on board than to go and look for themselves and find what's the real answer, instead of saying, yeah, well, his tale sounds good, we'll go with him. And it's unfortunate, but yeah, a lot of, I guess, we just need to, I think people have to be able to not allow themselves, and I've worked on that myself, is not allow themselves to get caught up in all the chaos and the craziness out there. Because I remember I used to sit on Twitter and for an hour or so going through all the crazy tweets and responses, and just going, oh my God, how do people think and feel like this and say things like that? And now it's like, I don't spend energy on it. I catch myself going, oh, right, no, I don't do this anymore. I don't go and read all these crazy tweets that are out there just to grab attention or to make a name or whatever. And I try to focus on the good stuff or spend my energy on more positive, positive things out there that are going to benefit me. And it, there, yeah, there is a positive outcome from it. Instead of spending all that time doing stuff that it is impacting my ability to move forward, I'm finding it so much easier because there's less energy spent on negativity and more on self-improvement, and I think that's a good step, one of the steps to help someone who has trauma and struggling with it is to step away from so much all that negativity out there and try to focus on themselves or focus on a good thing, or like,
which is super challenging.
yeah,
It would sound strange to someone that doesn't understand or know trauma, but for people that have experienced a lot of trauma, positivity and even something like love and care can feel wrong.
yeah,
It can feel
yeah,
uncomfortable. It can make you your skin crawl, like you want to run out of the room, because
yeah,
it's so foreign. And a lot of things happen when something positive or something loving or something caring shows up for someone that is totally not used to it.
yeah,
There's often a sense of like, I don't trust this isn't real. B, there can be easily a sense that if it's there and if it's good, it's not going to last. And so a lot of people will blow up a relationship or an interaction because the idea of it being good and then them losing it is so terrible that they would rather be the instrument of it ending than to have to wait for it to happen to them. So like there's these things that don't make a lot of sense to someone looking in from the outside, but when you understand trauma, it makes total sense that would be
yeah,
the case. So I just want to bring the pieces for people that are listening that are carrying their unintegrated traumatic past still in their lives. Is like, I think a lot of times it can feel like impossible, like Mount Everest. Like, how am I ever going to sort all this out? And
yeah,
one of the things that I really want to share with people, and whether I'm working directly with them or just through things like this, like a podcast, is you don't have to fix it all. You don't have to have all the answers. You don't have to figure it all out. What's important is, can you do something today, something small, that is a little bit different than yesterday, that is a little bit some more supportive to yourself, to your own sense of well-being, to your own sense of connection with humanity, to your own sense of being happy to be alive. If you can do just a little something each day that was more than yesterday, and you string some days together, the next steps start to reveal themselves. Like the next journey, the next guide that you need, the next resource, those things start to show up when we start to do these little things. There's a book. It's more around like peak performance, but there's a book called it's a guy, I think his name is Jesse, forgetting his last name, Jesse Smith. I might be getting that wrong. Anyway, he wrote a book called Atomic Habits. And
okay,
what he's really talking about is how tiny differences create massive differences in results over time.
mm.
And so to
Mm-hmm.
me, if someone's just interested in learning more, I think that book would be an interesting place to go, just to remind you that the journey of 1,000 steps begins with, or the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step.
Yeah,
That's all you need. You just need the next step, and life will afford you more as you go. Um, and I know how cynical we can be. I know how hard it can be to trust or to try
yeah,
again.
yeah,
And my experience of working with literally thousands and thousands of people that have experienced significant trauma, it's worth it. It's
absolutely.
simply worth it, and it's not an easy road. And
No.
when that's okay with us, uh, new things can start to happen. Real transformation can start to happen.
Yeah, I completely agree. I went from constantly, like, instinctively questioning myself and questioning reality of what I'm in and what is this for real, or do I deserve this, to, you know not having to question it, believing it outright. And the first thought that comes to mind is, yes, this is good. I like the feeling of this, and I want this, and I want more of it. And if it's not a quick path. You're not going to go from 0 to 100 in a day, but with, like you said, each day it's you do something a little different or a little more, and you're moving forward. Eventually you get to that point where you're like, you step out the door, and it's not looking around, where are the people who are holding me back. It's more like, let's go. Like, you're out looking for people who are going to be a positive influence in your life. That's like, ultimately, if you think about it in that aspect, that's where you want to be. So you want to be going out looking for them instead of hiding from people who you believe are holding you back.
Yeah, and something like courage is it's a must. You have to be willing to be in the fire, or lean into the fire, or see and feel the fear that's there, and relate to something other than the fear. And that's why human relationship and connection is so helpful for a journey like healing trauma, is because when we don't see it and feel it, someone else can reflect it to us.
Yeah.
And now eventually, of course, the real goal is where you internalize it, and you can, even in a moment where you don't feel safe, or you don't feel solid, or you feel some old pattern or some old emotion, and it really starts to take you in that moment, for you to know, oh, I don't have to go down that road anymore. I don't need that coping strategy. I get it. I see it. It's compelling. I really want to use it right now. And just today, I'm not going to. So again, like the relationships we can develop, the connections, the community we can start to invite around ourselves makes such a massive difference. And the most powerful thing we can do is to source that kind of reflection within ourselves, so that when people are around, we use them. We're meant to use each other, not in a bad way, but we're meant to literally use one another to all move forward together. And when we've self-sourced that piece, when people are not around, we keep moving forward. We don't use our own lack of access to external supports as a reason to not do what we can without that support. And eventually, this is another thing that I love to share with people that have experienced a lot of trauma, is if you sincerely walk this path for a good amount of time, you become an incredible resource and really a beacon for others along that path. Because someone who is healed from trauma is able to provide something to people who are healing that someone who has not experienced trauma cannot.
Yeah.
It's just different.
Absolutely. I agree with that 100%. Yeah. I think the most recent thing I can remember in my own path was when I was talking to a friend of mine, and I didn't have to be told. I said it myself. I said, yeah, sure, this is going to be tough for a while, but I know that I've got a group of close friends who are there for me. And that alone makes it so much more, plausible, so much better. And I don't feel like I'm by myself. I don't feel alone in this. I don't have to worry. I don't have to think about all that negative. All I go is say, yeah, I've got people who are there for me. And that is enough to get through this.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's it. Thank you so much, Dolphin, for being on this show. This was very enlightening and extremely beneficial, not just for myself, but I'm sure for my audience. They're going to get a lot out of this. I can already tell that.
Yeah, Russell, I really appreciate you reaching out to invite me. It's been an enjoyable time. I hope we get to do it again sometime. And yeah, for anyone that wants to find me, Dolphin Kasper is my name, so I'm easy to find on social media. Instagram is probably the easiest place to kind of find my contact info. And yeah, just invite people to engage, reach out. I share quite a bit of my writing and my work online, so I would love to share more with you and to be in touch. So again, thank you
Excellent.
for the time. I really appreciate it.
Not a problem. All right, everybody. Thanks for listening. Talk to you again later. Bye.